My name is Dania, and at 32 years old, I thought I had finally built a life to be proud of as a graphic designer in Chicago. Despite my success, nothing ever seemed good enough for my perfectionist mother Eleanor or my emotionally absent father Thomas. After avoiding home for 2 years, I reluctantly agreed to return for Christmas, hoping things might be different. I never imagined my mother would publicly declare her shame for me during dinner, or that I would finally find the courage to walk away. Before I dive into what happened at that Christmas dinner, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever dealt with family who just can't see your worth. Growing up in an affluent Boston suburb meant appearances were everything. Our colonial-style house with its manicured lawn was the perfect backdrop for my mother's obsession with social status. Eleanor Thompson was known throughout the neighborhood for her impeccable taste, her leadership in the country club social committee, and her ruthless judgment of anyone who failed to meet her standards, including her own daughter. My father Thomas rarely contradicted her. A corporate attorney who regularly worked 70-hour weeks, he existed on the periphery of our family dynamics, occasionally emerging to nod approvingly at my mother's decisions or to celebrate my brother Jake's achievements. Jake, 4 years. My senior followed my father's path into law and finance, securing his position as the golden child by the time he turned 12. Jake is going to make something of himself, my mother would tell her friends loud enough for me to hear. He understands what it takes to succeed. My younger sister Allison, Minville, became my mother's perfect mini-me. 2 years, my junior, she adopted Eleanor's mannerisms, fashion sense, and even her critical tone when addressing me. Together, they formed an alliance that left no room for my creative tendencies. Art was my escape from early childhood. I would spend hours drawing in my room, creating detailed illustrations that my elementary school teachers praised as exceptional. When I brought home a certificate for winning the regional young artist competition in 5th grade, my mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, but when are you going to focus on something that could lead to a real career?" No achievement seemed to satisfy her. My straight A's were expected, not celebrated. When I made honor roll, she asked why I hadn't been selected for the more prestigious National Honor Society. When I became editor of the school newspaper, she wondered why I wasted time on that artsy stuff instead of joining debate club like Jake had. Artist-starved Danya became her mantra whenever I mentioned pursuing graphic design. No Thompson has ever lived hand-to-mouth, and I won't have you be the first. Senior year of high school marked our first major confrontation. I had been offered a substantial scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design, but my mother insisted I attend Boston University for business like Jake. The argument lasted weeks, ending with me compromising on a dual degree in marketing and design at Northwestern. Even this prestigious program didn't please her. "At least it's a real university," she sniffed when I announced my acceptance. "Though I don't understand why you need to go all the way to Chicago." Distance, as it turned out, was exactly what I needed. Those 1,000 miles between Chicago and Boston allowed me to breathe for the first time. Over the next decade, I built a career I was proud of, working my way up from junior designer at a small agency to creative director at one of Chicago's most innovative design firms. My work won awards. I purchased my own apartment. I created a life filled with supportive friends and fulfilling creative challenges. Home visits became increasingly rare and painfully predictable. Each return was met with the same pattern: initial politeness that deteriorated into subtle criticisms, culminating in some devastating comment just before my departure. My success was always minimized. My life choices questioned, my appearance scrutinized. "Marketing is the real part of your job," my mother would say. "The drawing is just extra." The pandemic provided a perfect excuse to skip holidays for 2 full years. Video calls were easier to end when the criticism began, and I could mute my mother's voice when needed. But as restrictions lifted, the pressure to return intensified. "People are asking why you never come home," my mother said in the call. That finally convinced me to book a flight for Christmas. "It's starting to look like you don't care about family." Jake called too, playing the reasonable older brother. "Just come for a few days, Danya. Mom's getting older. Dad's health isn't great. You know how important appearances are to them." Appearances. Always appearances. In the weeks before Christmas, my mother's texts escalated. Make sure you pack something appropriate for Christmas Eve service. Jake's wife Melissa always wears a dress for Christmas dinner, not those loose things you call fashion. We're having the Andersons over. Remember their son Michael? He's divorced now, still a surgeon. By the time my flight landed in Boston, my stomach was a knot of anxiety. I was 32 years old, financially independent, professionally successful, and still desperate for approval I knew would never come. The cab ride from Logan Airport to my parents' Lexington home felt like traveling back in time. As we passed through the familiar neighborhoods with their colonial houses decorated with tasteful white lights and evergreen wreaths, I could feel myself shrinking, becoming smaller with each mile. The Thompson family home looked exactly as it always had. Pristine exterior, elegant holiday decorations that my mother surely supervised the landscapers in arranging. Nothing too flashy or colorful, just restrained expensive perfection that announced our family status without being gauche enough to state it outright. I paid the driver and stood in the driveway for a moment, gathering strength. My suitcase felt heavier than it should as I dragged it up the brick walkway and rang the doorbell instead of using my old key. A symbolic gesture, I was now a visitor, not a resident. My mother opened the door, wearing a cashmere sweater, and pearls her silver blonde hair perfectly styled despite it being nearly 9 in the evening. Her eyes scanned me from head to toe before she spoke. You finally made it. We were beginning to wonder if your flight was delayed. No hook, no warmth. She stepped aside to let me enter. You look tired, and you've gained weight. Less than 10 seconds, and it had already begun. Nice to see you too, Mom, I said, forcing a smile as I entered the foyer with its familiar smell of pine and cinnamon potpourri. My father appeared from his study, reading glasses perched on his nose, phone still in hand as if he'd been interrupted on an important call. There she is. Welcome home, he said, giving me a brief one-armed hug before stepping back. How's the graphic arts business? Graphic design is going very well, Dad. We just landed a major account with Jake and Melissa are already here with the kids, my mother interrupted. They're in the living room. And Allison arrived yesterday. She's bringing Andrew for breakfast tomorrow. They can't wait to show you the engagement ring. Of course, Jake would already be here ensconced in the living room like the prince returning to his kingdom. And of course, Allison would be engaged to a man who I guaranteed had my parents' complete approval. The living room tableau was exactly as I'd expected. Jake in an armchair by the fire, looking important even in casual clothes, his wife Melissa perched nearby supervising their 2 children, Taylor, age 7, and Bradley, age 5. Both were dressed in coordinating holiday outfits despite the late hour. Aunt Danya, Taylor said, showing more enthusiasm than the adults. Bradley hung back, barely remembering me after 2 years. Jake stood giving me a brotherly hug that felt rehearsed. The prodigal daughter returns, he said, with that slight condescending tone he'd perfected in law school. How's life in the Windy City? Successful, I answered with more confidence than I felt. We just won a National Design Award for our campaign with Atlantic Technologies. That's great, Jake said without interest. I just made partner at the firm. Youngest in 20 years. And there it was, the immediate one-upmanship that characterized every Thompson family interaction. Melissa stood to greet me, perfect in her designer jeans and silk blouse. Danya, we've missed you at family gatherings. The children barely know their aunt. The accusation was thinly veiled, and I felt the familiar guilt rising. Before I could respond, Allison swept into the room. Finally decided to grace us with your presence. She air-kissed both my cheeks, her diamond tennis bracelet catching the light. Wait until you see my ring tomorrow. Andrew did incredibly well, almost a full carat larger than Melissa's. She winked at our sister-in-law who forced a tight smile. My mother reappeared with a glass of white wine for me. She'd never forgotten I preferred red. Just half a glass for you, Danya. You look like you've been enjoying too many indulgences in Chicago. Dinner that first night was an interrogation thinly disguised as catching up. Every question was a trap. Are you seeing anyone special? Translation, why aren't you married yet like your siblings? Still renting that apartment. Translation, when will you own real estate like a responsible adult? Is that agency still keeping you busy? Translation, when will you get a serious corporate job with stability? Each of my answers was met with subtle grimaces or exchanged glances between my mother and Allison. Jake occasionally jumped in with stories about his important cases or Melissa's charity work. My father mostly checked his phone under the table. I bought my apartment last spring, I mentioned during a rare pause. It's in Wicker Park, one of Chicago's most vibrant neighborhoods. Owned or co-op? My father asked, briefly interested in the financial details. Owned. And I'm overseeing a complete renovation of the kitchen. Hopefully you didn't stretch yourself too thin, my mother commented. Those artistic jobs can be so unpredictable. I'm the creative director now, Mom. My position is very secure and I manage a team of 12 designers. Speaking of news, Jake interrupted, should we tell Dania about your promotion, Dad? And just like that, the conversation shifted to my father's new position as managing partner, Jake's partnership, and Allison's engagement to Andrew, a pharmaceutical sales director from one of Boston's oldest families. After dinner, I escaped to my childhood bedroom, which my mother had preserved like a museum to my teenage years, minus any evidence of my artistic pursuits. The walls were still painted, the pale blue she had chosen, the furniture, the traditional cherry wood she preferred. Only the precisely arranged school awards and team photos reflected that I had once lived here. I texted my friend Sophia back in Chicago day one, already counting hours until my flight home. The next morning, I came downstairs early, hoping for some peace before the family dynamics resumed. Instead, I found Marjorie, our longtime housekeeper, preparing breakfast. Marjorie had been with our family since I was 10 and she was the only person who had consistently shown interest in my art and my life. Her warm smile as I entered the kitchen was the first genuine welcome I'd received. "There's my girl," she said, pulling me into a hug that smelt of cinnamon and coffee. "Let me look at you, successful and beautiful, just as I always knew you'd be." For a brief moment, I felt seen. "They driving you crazy yet?" she asked in a hushed tone, sliding a cup of coffee across the counter. "Started in the first 30 seconds, I admitted, gratefully accepting the perfectly prepared coffee. Marjorie alone remembered I took it with 1 sugar, no cream. "Your mother's been polishing silver and rearranging table settings for days," Marjorie confided. "The big Christmas dinner has her more worked up than usual. 14 people tomorrow." 14, I hadn't realized we were having such a large gathering. "Your parents, you 3 kids and your partners, your grandparents, Thompson and Helen, and Uncle Robert, cousin Laura and her husband Patrick, and the Andersons." "Well, just Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. Their son had to work." Marjorie gave me a knowing look. "Your mother was quite disappointed about that." I laughed despite myself. "Still trying to marry me off, I see." "Some things never change," Marjorie said, squeezing my hand. "But you've changed, Dania. I see it in your eyes. You've built something for yourself out there." Her validation meant more than she knew, a small fortification against the day ahead. Christmas morning in the Thompson household had always been a choreographed affair. Unlike other families with their chaotic unwrapping frenzies and pajama-clad excitement, we dressed properly, ate a formal breakfast and took turns opening gifts in an orderly fashion while my mother documented everything with her camera. "Dania, you could have worn something more festive," my mother commented as I came downstairs in black slacks and a dark green sweater. "Allison always wears red on Christmas morning." On cue, Allison appeared in a red cashmere dress, Andrew trailing behind her in coordinating attire. Andrew Harris was exactly what I'd expected. Tall, conventionally handsome, with the confident demeanor of someone who'd never questioned his place in the world. He worked for his father's pharmaceutical company and had known our family for years through country club connections. "Dania," he greeted me with a firm handshake. "Allison says you're some kind of artist in Chicago." "Graphic designer," I corrected. "I'm the creative director at Verve Agency." "Fascinating," he said, without interest. "I handle the Northeast territory for Harris Pharmaceuticals. Just closed a $3 million deal with Mass General." Jake and Melissa arrived with their children, both adults holding coffee mugs that clearly didn't come from my mother's kitchen. We stopped for real coffee, Jake explained, not bothering to keep his voice down, although we could all see Marjorie setting out my mother's carefully selected breakfast spread. Boston Bean still makes the best latte in town. The gift exchange proceeded with military precision. My father distributed presents one by one from under the tree, each person opening, while others watched, followed by the expected thanks and my mother's photographs. I had spent weeks selecting thoughtful gifts. A first edition book by my father's favorite historical author, a handcrafted silk scarf from a Chicago artisan for my mother, custom cufflinks featuring Jake's children's birthstones, a spa package for Melissa, and for Allison, a framed original illustration I'd created of the Boston Public Garden where she'd met Andrew. Each gift was received with the same tepid appreciation. "How unique," my mother said about the scarf, carefully refolding it into its box. "Very creative," my father commented on the book, placing it aside without reading the personal inscription. Jake at least pretended interest in the cufflinks. These must have taken some time to design. Allison looked at her illustration with a forced smile. "It's very artistic, though we actually met at the boathouse, not by the bridge." When my turn came to open gifts, the contrast was stark. My father gave me a gift card to a department store chain that didn't even have locations in Chicago. Jake and Melissa presented me with a generic scented candle set. Allison and Andrew's gift was a cookbook titled Simple Meals for Busy Professionals, a thinly veiled commentary on my single status. My mother's package contained a tailored blouse in a style I hadn't worn in years, 2 sizes too small with the gift receipt prominently attached. "I wasn't sure about the size," she said with a pointed look at my figure. "You can exchange it if necessary." The morning improved slightly when my cousin Laura arrived with her husband Patrick and their toddler son. Laura had always been the family outlier, warm, genuine, and supportive of my creative pursuits. She'd escaped the Thompson orbit by marrying a music teacher and moving to Vermont. "Danya," she exclaimed, giving me a genuine hug, "your holiday cards were amazing this year." I framed the illustration of the Chicago skyline. "Are you selling prints?" "You should be." Before I could answer, my mother interjected, "Laura, come see the new dining room chandelier. We had it imported from Italy." Patrick, sensing my disappointment, hung back. "Family gatherings," he said with a knowing smile. "Always a special kind of stress, aren't they?" "The Thompson version is particularly special," I admitted. "Laura always says your family makes hers look positively bohemian," he chuckled. "Hang in there. We've got your back." Throughout the morning, my mother's comments grew increasingly pointed. "When I helped arrange appetizers, Danya, the crackers go on the right side. After all these years, you still don't remember how to set a proper table. When Jake discussed his recent vacation, Danya, you should ask your brother about financial planning. 32 is too old to still be living paycheck to paycheck in a creative field." When Allison showed everyone her engagement photos, "I suppose you could always find a nice man in Boston if Chicago isn't working out for you." To escape, I retreated to the kitchen where Aunt Helen was arranging dessert platters. Unlike my mother, Aunt Helen, my father's sister, had always shown genuine interest in my life. "Tell me about your work, Danya," she said as she handed me a knife to help slice the pumpkin bread. "I saw that packaging design you did for that coffee company. Very impressive." For 15 minutes, I felt the simple pleasure of talking about my passion with someone who actually listened. I showed her photos of recent projects on my phone, explained our agency's design philosophy, and shared news about my upcoming solo exhibition at a Chicago gallery. "You've really made something of yourself," Aunt Helen said with genuine pride. "I always knew you would." Just as I began to relax, my mother appeared in the kitchen doorway. "Danya, are you boring Helen with all your drawing stories? Come help set the dining room, and please change before dinner. That sweater doesn't suit the occasion." As she turned away, Aunt Helen squeezed my arm. "Your work isn't just drawing, Danya. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." I nodded gratefully, but the familiar knot of anxiety had already returned to my stomach as I prepared for the main event, Christmas dinner. The Thompson family dining room looked like it belonged in a luxury home magazine. My mother had outdone herself with the table setting, fine china, sterling silver flatware, crystal glasses, and an elaborate centerpiece of white roses and evergreens. Name cards in perfect calligraphy marked each person's assigned seat strategically, placing me between Grandmother Thompson and Mr. Anderson, far from the allies I might have found in Laura or Aunt Helen. By 6 o'clock, all 14 guests were seated. My father at one end of the table, mother at the other, controlling the room even from a distance. Jake and Melissa were positioned prominently near my father, their children, at a small kids' table in the corner. Allison and Andrew sat beside my engagement ring, catching the light with every gesture Allison made. The first course arrived, butternut squash soup garnished with cream fraiche and chives, served by Marjorie and the additional server my mother had hired for the occasion. The conversation began pleasantly enough with discussions of weather, local news, and polite inquiries about everyone's health. "Thomas tells me your firm is doing well," my grandmother said to me as we started our soup. Despite her 90 years, Grandmother Thompson missed nothing, her mind as sharp as her tailored suit. "He mentioned some award." "Yes," I said, surprised and touched that my father had mentioned it. "We won the National Design Excellence Award for our campaign with Atlantic Technologies." "That's wonderful, dear. I always knew you had a special talent. I still have that drawing you made me when you were 9, the one of my garden. It's framed in my sitting room." This small acknowledgement from my grandmother felt like a rare gift. I began telling her about the campaign, how we developed the concept, the challenges we'd overcome, the recognition it had brought to our agency. From across the table, my mother's voice cut through our conversation. "Danya still insists on calling herself a designer when what she really does is marketing. Drawing pictures for advertisements, essentially." The table went quiet. I took a slow breath before responding. "Actually, Mom, I'm a creative director overseeing brand identity and visual communication strategies. It's quite a bit more than drawing pictures." "Well, we can't all have conventional careers," she replied with a tight smile. "Jake was just telling us about his latest corporate merger. A $50 million deal, wasn't it, Cheek?" On cue, my brother launched into a detailed explanation of his latest professional triumph, complete with references to legal statutes that no one at the table understood, but everyone pretended to find fascinating. As the main course was served, prime rib with roasted potatoes and glazed vegetables, my mother expertly directed the conversation toward Allison's wedding plans. "June at the country club," Allison announced. "Mother and I have already selected the floral arrangements and color scheme. The bridesmaids will wear dusty blue. It's very on trend. Danya will need to have her dress fitted well in advance," my mother added. "Last-minute alterations are so difficult." "Actually," Allison interjected with a glance at my mother. "We've decided on a smaller wedding party, just my college roommates. It's the modern approach." The calculated exclusion hung in the air. I had assumed, despite our differences, that I would be included in my sister's wedding. The realization that I'd been deliberately left out stung more than I wanted to admit. Laura, sensing my discomfort, tried to shift the conversation. "Danya, tell everyone about your gallery exhibition. That's huge news." "Exhibition?" my mother questioned before I could respond. "Is that what you're calling it when your office displays employee artwork in the lobby?" "No," Laura answered for me, her voice firm. "Danny has been selected for a featured artist showcase at the Northside Gallery. It's quite prestigious." For a moment, the table was silent. Then my father surprised me by asking, "What sort of work will you be showing?" Before I could answer, my mother laughed dismissively. "Thomas, you know Danya's little hobby isn't really gallery material. I'm sure it's just some promotional event for her company." "It's not promotional," I said, struggling to keep my voice even. "The gallery approached me after seeing my personal illustration series. It's completely separate from my professional work." "How nice that they're encouraging amateurs," my mother said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Though I do wish you'd put that energy into building a more stable career, or at least finding a suitable partner. You're not getting any younger, Danya." And Helen tried to intervene. "Eleanor, Danya's career is quite impressive. Creative directors at her level can earn salaries comparable to many executives. But without the stability or respectability," my mother countered. "No pension, no real future, just drawing until someone younger comes along." The dinner continued in this vein, with every accomplishment I mentioned being diminished, every aspect of my life critiqued. I noticed Patrick giving Laura concerned glances as the tension escalated. Even Grandmother Thompson seemed troubled by the increasingly pointed comments. When dessert was served, my mother's signature bûche de Noël, my father stood to offer a toast. After thanking everyone for coming and acknowledging the beautiful meal, he raised his glass to family achievements, Jake's partnership, Allison's engagement, and he paused, glass still raised, seemingly searching for something to acknowledge about me. My mother filled the silence into hopes that the new year brings everyone the success and happiness they deserve. The omission was deliberate and unmistakable. As glasses clinked around the table, I noticed Aunt Helen and Laura exchange concerned glances. As coffee was being served, my mother tapped her spoon against her water glass. "I'd like to propose another toast," she announced, her voice carrying that special tone of forced graciousness she reserved for public performances. "This has been a remarkable year for our family. Thomas's new position as managing partner, Jake's extraordinary success and his children's achievements at school, and of course, Allison's beautiful engagement to Andrew." She smiled broadly at each person as she mentioned them. "I feel so blessed to have raised such accomplished children." She paused, then added with a laugh that sounded like breaking glass. "At least two of them anyway." The table went silent. I felt every eye turn toward me. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice barely audible. "What does that mean?" My mother's smile remained fixed, but her eyes hardened. "Oh, Danya, don't be so sensitive. We're all family here. Everyone knows how we feel." "No," I said, my heart pounding. "I don't think I do know." "Why don't you explain?" The challenge hung in the air. My mother's smile faltered for just a moment before she straightened her shoulders and addressed the table rather than me. "Well, if we're being completely honest, we've always been a bit ashamed of Danya's choices. The impractical career, the stubborn refusal to settle down, moving so far away from family obligations. It's been disappointing." She laughed again as if she'd made a charming joke. A few uncomfortable chuckles echoed around the table. Jake, Andrew, Mr. Anderson, while others looked down at their plates. "We're ashamed of you, Danya," my mother continued, her voice carrying that familiar blend of criticism wrapped in false concern. "Always have been. I mean, drawing for a living at your age. No husband, no children, no real security. It's not what we raised you for." The room seemed to tilt. 32 years of accumulated hurt crystallized in that moment. Every dismissal, every comparison, every time my passions had been treated as childish whims. I could have cried. I could have shouted. I could have thrown my wine in her perfectly made-up face. Instead, I found myself standing, napkin placed carefully beside my half-eaten dessert. "For 32 years, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I have tried to earn your approval. I've compromised my dreams, doubted my talents, and diminished my accomplishments because nothing I did was ever good enough for you." My mother's smile froze. "Danya, don't make a scene." "No, Mom. You made the scene when you decided to publicly humiliate your daughter at Christmas dinner." I looked around the table, making eye contact with each family member. For years, I believed there was something wrong with me. That if I just tried harder, achieved more, became what you wanted, you might finally be proud of me. My father shifted uncomfortably. "Danya, your mother didn't mean yes, she did. She absolutely meant it. And you've enabled it my entire life." I turned back to my mother. "The truth is, nothing would ever be enough because this isn't about my choices. It's about your need to control, to mold everyone around you into reflections of your own narrow definition of success." My mother's face had gone pale. "How dare you speak to me this way after everything we've done for you? What exactly have you done for me?" Criticized every choice, undermined every achievement, compared me constantly to Jake and Allison. I took a deep breath. "Did you think I never found out that you called Rhode Island School of Design and turned down my scholarship without telling me Marjorie saw the letter? She told me years ago." Gasps came from several people at the table. My mother's eyes darted to Marjorie, who stood at the dining room entrance, her face solemn but unrepentant. That scholarship was my dream, I continued, but you decided it wasn't the right path. Just like you've decided everything else about my life wasn't right. My career isn't a hobby or a failure. I'm respected in my field. I own my home. I have meaningful relationships. I've built a life that makes me proud even if it doesn't fit your narrow definition of success. I picked up my purse from the floor beside my chair. The saddest part is that you're so obsessed with appearances that you've never actually seen me. You've never tried to understand what matters to me or what I'm passionate about, and that's your loss. Looking directly at my mother, I delivered the final blow. I'm not ashamed of who I am or the life I've built, but I am ashamed to have a mother who values status over her daughter's happiness, who would rather have a child who meets her expectations than one who is authentically herself. My mother's carefully constructed composure crumbled. Her eyes filled with tears, not the manipulative ones I'd seen her use to get her way, but genuine shocked tears. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. "Merry Christmas," I said to the table at large. "Thank you for the dinner." With that, I walked out of the dining room through the foyer and out the front door into the cold December night, leaving behind a table of stunned relatives and my mother's uncontrollable sobs. The night air hit my face like a slap, sharp and clarifying. I fumbled with my rental car keys, hands shaking as I unlocked the door and slid into the driver's seat. For a moment, I just sat there, knuckles white on the steering wheel, waiting for regret or doubt to creep in. Instead, I felt an unexpected lightness, as if I'd put down a burden I'd been carrying my entire life. I started the car and drove away from the perfect Thompson family home with its tasteful Christmas lights and expensive wreaths. Without conscious direction, I found myself heading toward Franklin Park, a place I'd often escaped to as a teenager with my sketchbook when the pressure at home became too intense. The park was deserted on Christmas night, a light dusting of snow covering the benches and pathways. I parked and sat on a cold bench near the pond where I'd spent countless hours drawing ripples in the water and the patterns of bare tree branches against the sky. My phone had been buzzing since before I reached the car. I finally looked at it. "Laura, are you okay?" That was incredibly brave. "Patrick and I are here if you need anything." "Aunt Helen, you said what needed saying for years. Staying at the Lexington Marriott if you need a place tonight. Jake, 3 missed calls and a text. You need to come back and fix this. You know how mom gets. She's hysterical. Dad, 1 text only. Your behavior was unacceptable. Come back and apologize to your mother immediately. Allison, congratulations on ruining Christmas. Again, mom can't stop crying and grandma is upset. Hope you're happy with yourself." I turned off my phone and stared at the frozen pond. Return and apologize. For what? For finally standing up for myself after decades of emotional abuse disguised as parental concern, for refusing to continue the charade that our family was perfect as long as I accepted my designated role as the disappointing child. No, I couldn't go back. Not tonight, probably. Not this trip at all. The thought brought both relief and profound sadness. Despite everything, they were still my family, and some childish part of me had never stopped hoping for their approval, their understanding, their unconditional love. After an hour in, the cold reality set in. I needed somewhere to stay. I turned my phone back on long enough to book a room at a hotel near the airport, deliberately choosing a different one than Aunt Helen had mentioned. As much as I appreciated her support, I needed to be alone to process what had just happened. The hotel room was generic and impersonal, exactly what I needed. No family photos, no childhood memories, no weight of expectations. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed myself to cry. Not delicate tears, but ugly, wrenching sobs that left me gasping for breath. I cried for the little girl who had never been good enough, for the teenager whose dreams had been dismissed, for the adult who still flinched at criticism. I cried for the family I wished I had, and for the painful recognition that they would never be that family. When the tears finally subsided, I took a long shower, ordered room service. I couldn't eat, and lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying the dinner scene, and wondering what would happen next. Morning brought no clarity, but did bring more messages. Grandmother Thompson had called, leaving a voicemail in her clear, dignified voice. "Danya, it's Grandma. What happened last night was unfortunate, but perhaps overdue. Your mother had a similar relationship with her own mother, though that doesn't excuse her behavior. Call me when you're ready to talk. Jake had sent 3 more texts, each more demanding than the last, culminating in Mom didn't sleep all night. Dad says your car is gone from the house. Where are you staying? This is completely irresponsible. Most surprising was a call from Marjorie, which I answered on the second ring. Oh, thank goodness, she said when she heard my voice. I've been so worried about you. I'm okay, Marjorie, just processing everything. You should know what happened after you left, she said, her voice low, as if she was making sure no one could overhear. Your mother completely fell apart, not just crying, it was like something broke inside her. Your father couldn't calm her down. Jake tried to take charge, but that just made things worse. What about everyone else? Most of the guests left pretty quickly. Your Aunt Helen had some choice words for your father before she went, said it was long overdue that someone told the truth in this family. Cousin Laura refused to let your mother blame you, stood up for you quite firmly. I closed my eyes, grateful for these unexpected allies. Your grandmother stayed the longest, Marjorie continued. She sat with your mother for nearly an hour, but I couldn't hear what they discussed. When she left, she looked, I don't know, sad but resolved. And Allison? Crying almost as much as your mother, saying you'd ruined her holiday engagement celebration. Andrew looked completely out of his depth. Marjorie paused. Danya, what you said about the scholarship letter. I never meant to cause trouble by telling you. You didn't cause trouble, Marjorie. You were the only one who ever told me the truth. And I didn't mention your name last night. They just assumed it was you because you're the only one who ever really supported me. We talked for a few more minutes before she had to go help with breakfast. Before hanging up, she said, whatever you decide to do, know that you did nothing wrong. Sometimes the truth needs to be spoken even when it hurts. After our call, I changed my return flight, managing to get a seat on a plane leaving that evening instead of waiting 2 more days as originally planned. I couldn't face another confrontation, another demand for an apology I wasn't willing to give. As I was packing my few belongings, my phone rang again. Grandmother Thompson. This time I answered. Danya, she said without preamble, I want you to know that I understand why you left last night and I don't blame you. Thank you, Grandma, I said, throat tight with unexpected emotion. Your mother had a difficult upbringing herself, she continued. Her mother, my husband's first wife, was even more critical and status-conscious than Eleanor is. It doesn't excuse how she's treated you, but it might help explain it. Understanding the reason doesn't make it hurt any less, I said quietly. No, it doesn't, she agreed. And you shouldn't have to keep accepting it. I should have said something years ago, but at my age, one becomes too accustomed to keeping the peace. We talked for nearly 30 minutes, my grandmother sharing insights into my mother's childhood that I'd never known, helping me see the generational patterns at work. It didn't heal the wound, but it helped me see my mother as a damaged person rather than just a cruel one. What should I do now, Grandma? I asked finally. That depends on what you want, dear. If you want a relationship with your parents going forward, there will need to be boundaries and honest conversations. If you need time away, that's valid too. But don't let last night be the final word, unless that's truly what you want. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the hotel bed contemplating my options. Going back to the house felt impossible. Leaving without another word felt unresolved. In the end, I wrote a letter. Not an apology, but an explanation of how I felt and what would need to change if we were to have any relationship moving forward. I sealed it in the hotel's stationery envelope, addressed it to both my parents, and dropped it at their house when I knew they would be out at their annual post-Christmas lunch with friends. As my plane lifted off from Logan Airport that evening, I felt both heartbroken and liberated. I had no idea what would happen next with my family, but for the first time I was prioritizing my own emotional well-being over their expectations. Whatever came next, I wouldn't be facing it as the same person who had arrived in Boston just 2 days earlier. The Chicago skyline welcomed me home, its familiar outline against the night sky more comforting than any Christmas decoration. My apartment, my space designed to my taste, filled with my art and memories I'd chosen, felt like a sanctuary after the emotional battlefield of my parents' house. I dropped my suitcase in the entryway and stood in the middle of my living room breathing in the silence. No criticism here, no comparison, no need to make myself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. My phone had remained off for most of the flight. When I finally turned it back on, the barrage of notifications made me wince. Multiple missed calls from my parents' house, several texts from Jake demanding I fix this situation, and one surprisingly conciliatory message from Alice and Moms, a complete mess. I've never seen her like this. What did you say to her after I left the table? I responded to none of them, silencing my phone again and falling into an exhausted sleep on my couch, still wearing my travel clothes. New Year's Eve arrived a few days later. I had planned to attend a party with colleagues but found myself canceling at the last minute, not ready to put on a festive face and make small talk. Instead, I ordered takeout and was settling in for a night alone when my doorbell rang. Sophia stood in the hallway holding a bottle of champagne and a bag of Chinese food. "Thought you might need company," she said simply. Sophia had been my closest friend since design school, the person who had witnessed my struggle to break free from my family's expectations and build my own identity. I hadn't told her the full story of Christmas dinner yet, just texted that things had gone badly and I'd left early. As we sat cross-legged on my living room floor sharing dumplings and spring rolls, I finally told her everything. My mother's public declaration of shame, my response, the dramatic exit, and the aftermath. "Holy shit, Danya," Sophia said when I finished. "I mean, I knew your mom was difficult, but that's straight-up emotional abuse." "It's weird," I said, picking at a scallion pancake. For years, I thought it was normal. That all parents had such high expectations that the problem was me not meeting them. Sophia refilled our glasses. Classic gaslighting. Make you think you're the one with the problem when they're the toxic ones. The thing is, I don't even know what happens next. Do I ever talk to them again? Do I try to repair things? Just pretend it never happened. "You don't have to decide anything right now," Sophia assured me. "Give yourself time to process. You've been managing their emotions your whole life. Maybe it's time to focus on your own for a while." Her words struck home. How much of my life had been shaped by anticipating my parents' reactions, trying to avoid their disappointment, seeking their elusive approval? When midnight came, we toasted not to the new year but to boundaries and self-respect. It felt more meaningful than any resolution I could have made. January brought the return to work and the distraction of professional responsibilities. My team was supportive without being intrusive, seeming to understand instinctively that I needed the normalcy of creative challenges and deadlines. Mid-month, I finally worked up the courage to seek professional help, finding a therapist who specialized in family trauma and adult children of narcissistic parents. Dr. Larson's gentle but probing questions in our first session helped me see patterns I'd been too close to recognize. "What you're describing is a classic golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic," she explained. "Your brother and sister were assigned the roles of success stories while you were cast as the problem child, regardless of your actual achievements." "But why?" I asked. "Why would a parent do that to their own child?" "Often it's because something about that child, their temperament, their interests, their independence, threatens the parent's sense of control or reflects qualities the parent has rejected in themselves." We explored how my artistic inclinations and independent thinking had made me the difficult child in my mother's eyes, while Jake's compliance and Allison's mimicry of our mother had been rewarded. More painfully, we discussed my father's role as an enabler who chose peace with my mother over protection of his daughter. "Your Christmas dinner confrontation was what we might call a pattern-breaking event," Dr. Larson said. "You changed the script, refused your assigned role, and that's deeply threatening to a family system built on those established patterns." The therapeutic process wasn't easy. Some sessions left me emotionally drained, others angry, some just profoundly sad for the relationship I'd never had with my parents. But slowly, I began to separate my self-worth from their approval, to see their criticism as a reflection of their issues rather than my failures. In late January, Jake called. I let it go to voicemail twice before finally answering the third time, bracing myself for blame and demands. "Danya," he said, his voice lacking its usual confident authority. I owe you an apology. Of all the things I'd expected him to say, an apology wasn't on the list. You don't understand what Mom said at dinner was wrong. Really wrong. I should have said something then instead of telling you to come back and fix it afterward. I remained silent, waiting for the but that would normalize our mother's behavior. Instead, Jake sighed heavily. I've had a lot of time to think about how different our experiences growing up were. I was talking to Melissa about it and she pointed out how Mom always praised everything I did while criticizing you for the same achievements. Melissa noticed that. Everyone noticed it, Danya. We just didn't say anything because it was easier not to. The admission stung, but I appreciated his honesty. So what's different now? After you left, Mom completely fell apart. Not just the crying but afterward. She's barely getting out of bed. Dad's worried about her. And instead of thinking about how you must have felt all these years, they're focused on how your reaction affected her. That sounds about right, I said dryly. The thing is, Jake hesitated. Watching all this, I started remembering things. How Mom would hang my mediocre art projects on the fridge but tell you your amazing drawings were just doodles. How she'd brag about my B+ in calculus but ignore your A in advanced studio article. We talked for nearly an hour, Jake seeming to realize for the first time the disparity in our treatment. While he didn't fully understand how could he, having always been the favored child, his acknowledgement was more than I'd ever expected. They're not going to change overnight, he warned before we hung up. Dad's completely in denial, saying you overreacted and need to apologize. And Mom's alternating between depressed and angry. I don't expect them to change, I said. I just can't pretend anymore that their behavior is okay. February brought a terse email from my father, his first direct communication since Christmas. The message was brief and managerial, as if addressing a difficult employee rather than his daughter. Your mother is seeing a therapist to deal with the stress of your Christmas outburst. We expect an apology before any further communication. Family matters should remain private, not be aired in front of guests. I showed it to Dr. Larsson in our next session. Notice what's missing, she said. Any acknowledgement of how your mother's words hurt you. Any responsibility for their part in the situation. It's still all about appearances. Family matters should remain private rather than addressing the actual problem. With her guidance, I crafted a response that maintained boundaries while leaving the door open, a crack. I'm glad Mom is getting help. I'm working with a therapist as well to address the long-term impact of our family dynamics. I can't apologize for finally expressing feelings I've held back for years, but I am open to a conversation about how we might build a healthier relationship moving forward if that's something you both want. He never replied. Allison's transformation was more gradual. Her initial angry texts gave way to cautious inquiries about my well-being. In March, she called unexpectedly. Andrew and I had a huge fight about the wedding, she said without preamble. I'm sorry to hear that, I responded, unsure where this was going. It was about the bridesmaids. I told him what Mom said, that it should just be my college friends, but he asked why my sister wouldn't be in my wedding. When I explained our complicated relationship, he said some things that made me think. What kinds of things? That excluding your only sister because our mother has issues with her was, in his words, pretty messed up. That he's marrying into our whole family and he's not sure he likes what he's seeing. She paused. He asked if I was going to let Mom control my entire wedding the way she's controlled everything else. The conversation marked a turning point with Allison. While we didn't become best friends overnight, we began to build a relationship independent of our mother's influence, discovering common ground we'd never explored while locked in our assigned family roles. Throughout this period, my mother made multiple attempts to re-establish control. There were guilt-inducing messages passed through Jake. Mom cried all through your birthday dinner. The empty chair was all she could see. There were manipulative gestures, a package containing childhood photos of us together with a note saying simply, "Remember when you loved me." Each attempt was harder to resist than the last. Dr. Larsson helped me recognize these as tactics rather than genuine attempts at reconciliation. True healing can only begin with acknowledgement, she reminded me. Until your mother can acknowledge the harm her words and actions have caused, any reconciliation will just reset the same destructive patterns. As winter gave way to spring, I focused on strengthening relationships with my chosen family, Sophia, my colleagues, my therapy group, the community of artists I'd connected with through my gallery exhibition. I learned to recognize my own achievements without seeking external validation, to trust my judgment, to value my creativity as more than a hobby or just drawing. The exhibition Dr. Larsson had encouraged me to proceed with opened in April, a series of mixed media pieces, exploring themes of identity, expectation and self-discovery. On opening night, surrounded by supporters who valued my work and understood my vision, I felt a sense of completeness I'd never experienced in my parents' home. Jake attended with Melissa, bringing a massive bouquet and genuine congratulations. Allison sent flowers with a note promising to visit for my next show. My grandmother, unable to travel at her age, asked for a video tour, which Jake provided via FaceTime, her pride evident even through the small screen. My parents sent nothing, said nothing. Their silence spoke volumes about the work still to be done, both their work and mine. As November arrived in Chicago, streets filled with holiday decorations, I found myself facing the looming question of Christmas plans. A year had passed since the dinner that had changed everything, a year of therapy, boundaries, painful realizations, and gradual healing. What would feel good to you this year? Dr. Larsson asked during our session. After a year of working together, she knew to focus on what I wanted rather than what I thought I should. Donnerstag, not Boston, I said immediately. I'm not ready to be in that house again, to sit at that table. That's completely valid. What alternatives feel appealing? I considered the options. I could stay here, host something for friends who aren't traveling, create new traditions. The idea took root and blossomed. I invited Sophia, two colleagues who had become close friends, and my downstairs neighbor, Rachel, who had recently divorced and was dreading her first holiday alone. Family of choice, Sophia called it when I shared my plans. In early December, an unexpected letter arrived, handwritten on my mother's personalized stationery. The elegant script, instantly recognizable: Danya, this has been the most difficult year of my life. After you left last Christmas, I fell into what my doctor now calls a severe depressive episode. I've been seeing a therapist weekly, taking medication and trying to understand what happened, not just at dinner, but throughout our relationship. I won't pretend one letter can repair decades of damage. My therapist suggested I start by simply acknowledging the truth of your experience without defending or explaining my behavior. So, I will say this. I was wrong to say I was ashamed of you, wrong to dismiss your career and your choices, wrong to compare you constantly to your siblings, wrong to make my approval conditional on you meeting my expectations. There are reasons for my behavior, my own mother's cruelty, my insecurities, my narrow definition of success, but none of these excuse the pain I caused you. I don't expect forgiveness, and I understand if you need more time or space. I just wanted you to know that your words at Christmas forced me to face truths about myself I've avoided my entire life. It has been painful and necessary. If you're open to it, perhaps we could speak by phone sometime. No pressure, no expectations. Your mother. I read the letter multiple times, emotions cycling between shock, skepticism, hope, and wariness. I brought it to my next therapy session where Dr. Larsson helped me process my complex reaction. This appears to be a genuine acknowledgement, which is a significant first step, she noted, but it's important to remember that one letter doesn't erase years of harmful patterns. Real change takes consistent effort over time. Do you think I should call her? What do you want to do? The question still felt new, prioritizing my wants, my emotional safety over obligation or guilt. After careful consideration, I decided to respond with a brief email thanking her for the letter and suggesting we try a short phone call after the holidays. Setting boundaries felt like self-care rather than selfishness now. Meanwhile, preparations for my chosen family Christmas continued. I decorated my apartment with ornaments I'd collected during my travels, each representing a choice I'd made, a place I'd explored, a piece of identity I'd claimed for myself. I designed custom holiday cards featuring my own illustration of the Chicago skyline in winter, sending them to friends, colleagues, and yes, family members, including my parents. Jake called mid-month to say he and Melissa were considering bringing the children to Chicago between Christmas and New Year's. The kids want to see their aunt, and honestly, we could use a break from the Boston family drama. Allison sent a text with a photo of her newly decorated first home with Andrew. Didn't use any of Mom's suggestions for our Christmas decor. Feels good to make our own traditions. My father remained largely silent, though he did send a formal Christmas card signed by both parents with a gift certificate to an upscale Chicago restaurant, impersonal but not unkind. As Christmas Eve arrived, my apartment filled with the warm chaos of friends bringing dishes, drinks, and small gifts. Sophia arrived early to help me prepare, bringing her famous tamales, part of her own family tradition she was sharing with our newly formed one. "How are you feeling about everything?" she asked as we arranged a charcuterie board. "The letter from your mom, the holidays, all of it." "Honestly peaceful," I replied, surprising myself with the realization. Not perfectly healed, not completely resolved, but peaceful. Like I'm exactly where I need to be right now. Our Christmas Eve dinner couldn't have been more different from the formal Thompson family event. We ate at my art studio table with mismatched chairs. We used everyday dishes rather than fine china. Conversation flowed naturally from serious topics to silly ones. Each person's thoughts valued equally. We played board games afterward, laughing until tears streamed down our faces. When everyone had gone and I was alone in the quiet of Christmas morning, I found myself reflecting on the journey of the past year. The painful confrontation at my parents' table had been necessary, not to hurt my mother, but to finally claim my own voice, my own worth, my own path. I couldn't change my family of origin. My mother might continue her efforts toward understanding and change, or she might revert to old patterns. My father might never fully acknowledge the dynamics that had caused such pain. Jake and Allison might grow closer to me or remain distant. But for the first time I understood that my value didn't depend on any of those outcomes. The real gift of that terrible Christmas dinner was the beginning of freedom. Freedom from seeking approval I couldn't earn, from diminishing myself to make others comfortable, from living by someone else's definition of success. A text arrived from Grandmother Thompson. "Merry Christmas, my brave girl. Your grandfather would have been so proud of the woman you've." "I certainly am." I smiled, feeling the truth of it settle in my heart. I was proud of myself too. Not for my career achievements or my material success, but for the courage to stand up, walk away, and begin building a life that honored my authentic self. That evening, surrounded by the friends who had become my chosen family, I raised a toast to boundaries that protect us, to truth that frees us, and to the family we create through love, than obligation. Later, when everyone had gone, I opened my sketchbook and began drawing, letting images flow from somewhere deep inside. A little girl standing tall, a broken chain, a door standing open, light spilling through. The beginnings of a new series, perhaps. Or just therapy on paper. The journey wasn't over. Healing rarely follows a neat linear path. There would be setbacks, difficult conversations, moments of doubt. The letter from my mother represented a possible beginning, not an ending. True reconciliation, if it came, would require work on both sides, my continued boundaries and her continued growth. But whatever happened with my family of origin, I had discovered something essential. I was enough exactly as I was. My creativity wasn't a hobby, but a calling. My sensitivity wasn't a weakness, but a strength. My differences weren't flaws, but gifts. Walking away from that Christmas table had been the first step toward authentic freedom. Every boundary set, every truth spoken, every act of self-care, since then had been another step on that journey. As snow fell gently outside my Chicago window, I felt gratitude for the painful catalyst that had launched this transformation. Sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the most difficult packages. Sometimes you have to leave the table before you can find your place in the world. Have you ever had to walk away from a toxic situation to find your true self? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like and subscribe. There's power in knowing we're not alone in these journeys. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself. See you in the next story.